Welcome to the It Matters podcast. I'm your host, Walter Perez, and let's dive in as we help you grow your mindset and elevate your leadership. Hey everyone, welcome back to the It Matters podcast. I am excited to introduce to you a good friend, my guest for today, Justin LaFavor. Now, since I started this podcast, actually even before I started this podcast, Justin's been a cheerleader. He's been a guy that has encouraged me along the way, directly, indirectly. And ever since I started this podcast, I knew that I wanted to have him on this show, and I'm excited we can make this happen. So Justin LaFavor, welcome to the It Matters podcast.
Hey, Walter, thanks for having me. Super pumped to be here, man.
I'm going to give you a little quick intro so everybody knows who you are, but you can add to this. You're a realtor. You're a businessman. Man, you are a high-class leader in my eyes, and I want you to hear that because the relationship we've had over the years, we met in high school. We went to the same high school. In fact, we can probably go back a couple of years. We first met in junior high. It's kind of a foggy a little bit for me, but I know we met playing soccer.
You say it's foggy because your team lost.
I guess that's what it is. That's what happened. We met in junior high playing soccer against each other. He went to a different junior high. My team lost. I like to think that I played better than him, but we don't know. We'll just keep it on. We'll keep going with that. So, brother, tell me a little bit about yourself, man, and so our guest and our audience can get to know you a little bit. What are you about?
At the risk of sounding cliche, Jesus first, wife second. My daughters come after that, and then family after that. And when I say family, I don't just mean people that I'm related to by blood. I mean the people that we get to hang out with in terms of clients, but they're not really clients because they end up becoming like just a big extended family. You're kind of in that category too, right? So yeah, just all about connections and helping people do great things.
Yeah, one thing I love about you is that in the years that we've known each other, which has been 20 plus years, we'll go through seasons where we're hanging out, seeing each other on a regular basis. We'll go weeks, months sometimes, but we always can get together. You'll call me up. You're doing something. I hop in a car and we go for a ride. And it's like we never even skipped a beat. And I just love it. And the common line that you and I use often is iron sharpens iron. Yeah. And I want to tell you that I appreciate this friendship and this relationship because truly, there's not a lot of people that I can say that I have relationships like the way I do with you. And I know when I go out and I come back, my wife says, okay, you came back better. And so I just wanted to point that out because I think anybody who's listening to this needs to understand that having friendships like this are important.
Mm-hmm. And then the reference, for those who are wondering where that phrase comes from, iron sharpens iron. It's a verse out of the Bible in Proverbs 27:17, I want to say. The part they left out of that verse, which Alex, your wife, is very familiar with, is when iron sharpens iron. Sometimes iron comes home smelling like cigar smoke. But that's okay.
Well, and what you're alluding to is you enjoy a good cigar, and that's awesome. And I've dabbled with it the odd time, and most of the time I don't, but I smell like I did. But this is what I like about that, especially when we're talking about iron sharpens iron. Sometimes we think, in order to get sharpened by somebody else, it has to be in that perfect room, in that perfect arena. Maybe we got to go to a mastermind. Maybe we got to, and there's something to be said about that. But you and I have been able to sharpen each other by going for a drive late at night, by being able to just talk about life, encourage each other, share, hey, this is what I'm going through. And it's funny, hey, you and I obviously, every time we talk, I feel like it, every single time we go, hey, I was just thinking about that. Or I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that. It's funny how that works, right?
It's very, very interesting. You say things and come up with insights that are so timely. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that when you're you have a connection with somebody on that same frequency, that it's just going to naturally happen that way, where you're just, I don't know what the word is, but you're in sync with each other. And it doesn't matter if it's like 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 days since you last seen them, you're just on the same level, as soon as you get back together. So that's kind of cool.
Mm. One thing I love too, for those of you watching this on YouTube, you're going to see that I'm wearing a hat, a nice, good looking logo. I'm wearing
It's
a
beautiful.
shirt that says #empowered. Huge fan, great merchandise. And the reason I'm wearing it is because it is Justin's merchandise, and it is part of your company name and what you represent. It's more than that company name, really. It's and why I'm bringing it up is because when I hang out with you, you do empower me, which is cool that you are putting this into your business world, but it really ripples into everything you're doing. And so why don't you tell us a little bit more about what I'm wearing here?
Well, you're a size medium, because that makes your shoulders and your biceps look a bit bigger. They're already big enough to begin with, so you don't need much help. But no, it was just this idea that I kind of had in terms of, well, one, it looks cool. And if we're going to put it all over our materials and, the books that we give to clients and the stuff that we do on social media, I thought, well, what better way to first off represent that, instead of just showing up like everybody else in, a suit and a tie, or in the case of my business partner, Sandy, the typical business attire. We can start wearing branded merchandise to kind of reflect that ethos that we want to embody when we're interacting with the people that we call clients and family, right? So that was kind of the first step. And then when we started wearing it, we thought, well, let's give some out to, some clients that, we've dealt with recently that might appreciate it. And they ended up going, we love this. And for probably the first year that we started giving out hats to clients, I would get texts from them months later saying, hey, I was in like BC and I was wearing this on the street, and I had 5 people come up to me in Kelowna and go, what is that? That looks so cool. And I'm like, oh, it's my realtor back in Edmonton. Sometimes I'll get texts and it'll be a picture of somebody in a restaurant, and it's like through 5 tables, right? And somebody off in another section of the restaurant's like wearing one of the hats, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's this guy. And so I'll text him, and he's like, what? Who's watching me? And then they'll, not know each other, but they're both clients and they're not related. But then they'll end up connecting at the restaurant, laughing over, this hat, or the shirt, for instance. So yeah, it's kind of a fun thing that we do to show our clients that, hey, like, we appreciate you, and if people want to rep the brand, I'm not going to stop them from doing that. So thank you for pointing it out and wearing it. You look really good in it.
Well, you made good quality things, so why not represent and wear it? And I mean, you feel good in it. And I mean, I love what you did with it, right? Empowered. Like, I do feel empowered when I'm out in life. And maybe talk a little bit about that word a bit more, because I mean, you do many things, but in your business, how has that given you purpose? Like, how is that word? Why is that so important to you?
I don't want to sound like I'm virtue signaling, because I am the first person to tell you I am so far from perfect. I am the reason that grace was invented. But I'd like to think, if I'm going to go through my life and I'm going to have interactions with people on a regular basis, how do I want them to feel when we've left that interaction? And I fail miserably at this sometimes, especially in traffic, when I'm trying to merge on the white mud and someone doesn't understand. You don't cut into the merge lane. That might not have been an empowering interaction with that individual, which may or may not have happened on the way to this podcast. But that being said, so if you're going to meet with somebody, connect with somebody, whether it's for like, weeks on end, if we're dealing with business, or even if it's just for a moment at like a coffee shop, and you're getting your order and you're about to go on your way, and you're probably never going to see the person that you're standing in line with ever again. My thought is always, how can I make sure that their day is better and brighter, and that they have a good experience, just because our life paths just bumped into each other? And if we take that approach in business, the cool thing happens is you don't just have work with clients and it's paper and numbers and all this other stuff. It's literally, you're just hanging out with a bunch of people that you really connect with and that you get along with, and that you all have this common goal of, let's help you solve this problem in your life. And for me, as a profession, that happens to be real estate. But oftentimes the conversations we have and the emotions that we're kind of navigating and the decisions that we're helping people make, it really has nothing to do with, four walls and a roof. It has everything to do with what's going on up here, what they're focusing on in here, and how do we align that in a way where they end up, making better choices and really living a life that's fulfilling instead of something that's limiting. And real estate can be a very limiting aspect if you don't do it right. Just like, any life choice can be a limiting aspect if you're not doing it the right way. So that's kind of what Empower, I think, embodies, is how can we connect with people, no matter where they are, what path they are on in life or what stage in life they're at, and basically leave them better than if they had never met us in the first place.
What I love about what you just said is that you've heard me talk about this multiple times. I'm the leadership guy. I love the idea we're adding value to people. We're trying to make people better. We're trying to empower them, and we're trying to elevate them. And when you say that, if you're going to do that, the Justin that I know needs to be better than, in order to be able to pass that on, serve people well. And I think you've been such a great example of knowing that, like, you want to add value to people, but you've also done a great job of adding value to yourself. And I think some people need to understand that we can have great intentions about shooting it out, but what are you doing to make sure that you can actually provide that or extend that to people? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I suppose. No, I don't think I disagree with anything there.
I mean, let's talk about it, because like you're a disciplined individual, and I mean, we can if anybody follows you on social media, like the things that you do, whether you talk about, grace, you needing grace, and you've done this, you fail, I'm there with you. And that's one of the cool things, by a side note here, that you and I, when we can talk, we can be very real and go, man, I need work on that. I need to work on that. I need to be better. And I don't have to feel like I need to pretend that I'm doing good or that I'm doing better than I am, because if I do that, how are you going to be able to encourage me and help me up? And maybe there's times where we have some healthy competitions or we have different ways of looking at it. But I love that, because I'm not just looking to get around people that agree with me 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that we're both on our own journey. We both read books, we listen to podcasts, we both listen to different people, and sometimes the same people, and we are able to say, how did you take that? How did you understand that? And we become better because of it.
Well, what you need to do, though, Walter, is you need to start with why, apparently. For those of you wondering why I'm ripping on Simon Sinek, I'm not. I have the utmost respect. He's written more books than I have, and they've sold a couple more copies. But Walter and I like to have this debate between, do we start with why, because it's a bestseller? And I've always said, forget why. That's a great way to, nosedive mentally, because then you're always searching for this thing instead of just getting to work. And I've said, instead of why, maybe focus on who. Who are you doing this for? Is it to prove somebody wrong? Is it to prove to yourself that you can get something done or accomplish whatever it is you set your mind to? Are you doing it for the people that you provide for? So in my case, my wife and my daughters, right? Like, who? If you have trouble figuring out your why, don't bother. Just figure out who are you doing it for, and then just get to work. And so we've had some funny conversations about that. I don't disagree, but I also like giving you a hard time.
Well, I'm going to have to return the hard time a little bit, because just to be clear, the last conversation you and I had about what you just said was right on and awesome, by the way. I think the last time, and maybe you forgot, I'm going to give you a reminder. You actually were talking about the what being super ultra important. And I believe what is important. I just came back and made the argument that why should be before the what. But when you bring the who into it, I think this is live on this podcast. We're going to meet in the middle here. This who is actually super important. You're right. Actually, my who makes my why. Let's be for real. I got 5 children, right? My family. At the end of the day, that is really the why, the who. I'm doing what I'm doing, yes, for people, but my family first, and trying to leave a legacy, trying to build something that also creates a great example for my kids to then ripple and impact other people. But yeah, I love what you said there.
Yeah, no, and again, I'm just giving you a hard time. I do agree, like, why is important. I just find for myself personally, going through personal development stuff and wanting to level up and, get better in different areas of my life. If we fixate on trying to figure out why, instead of just moving forward and putting one foot in front of the other, what ends up happening is we get stuck in the same place and we don't move anywhere. And that's a bit of a problem because then you don't have any progress, right? It's very common, I think, in circles of people who watch content like this, and you and I are in that boat as well, where you just get information overload. And I was actually listening to something on the way here because, personal development, and the fellow made a great point. His name was David Diga Hernandez on YouTube, and he said that information is not powerful unless it produces transformation.
Yeah.
And so going back to your comment about being disciplined, like this fellow, some people watching this may have heard of Dan Kennedy. He's a marketer and a business consultant, somebody I have a lot of respect for. I've given that guy a lot of money through all of his courses and products over the years. But one of the biggest takeaways that I got from Dan Kennedy in terms of discipline and personal development and improving yourself is not so much that somebody would say, well, you're like a 9 out of 10, you're disciplined, you're these labels. The reality is, it's not that you shouldn't believe your own press. And what Dan Kennedy says is, it's not that he's super disciplined. He's a 2 out of 10. It's just that everybody else thinks they're a 5 and they're actually a -10 because they're lazy and they're unmotivated and they're not disciplined. And so to somebody who doesn't act with discipline, somebody who is even moderately consistent is going to seem like Superman to them, to a broke person, somebody with $100 is rich, but to a guy with $100, but he's 100 grand in debt, a millionaire looks like he's got it made. But to a millionaire, he's got millionaire problems, but then he's looking at the billionaire going, well, I want that guy's problems, and he's got 2 jets, right? So it's all of these levels. And I think what's important to remember is that your frame of reference is really going to impact your ability to progress beyond where you are. Because if you just want to talk about on the topic of discipline, I am not disciplined. There's nothing worse than somebody who is consistent and disciplined at being consistent, who doesn't have that transformation and doesn't improve and doesn't make progress. And I'm a prime example of that in a lot of ways, unfortunately. I've been at this game for almost 2 decades in real estate. If you asked me 10 years ago, where would I be in 2024? It would have been here. And I'm here because, while I may have been disciplined in some areas, I haven't been disciplined or as consistent in a lot of other areas. And even if I was, has it produced the transformation that I was seeking? And if not, you got to go back to the drawing board and you got to start figuring out, why is that and what's the missing ingredient there? And I think it's leadership, to throw it back to you.
Okay, so I love where you went with that. And let's hang out on this word discipline. In your opinion, do you think in our culture that is you're talking about ingredients, that would be one of the main ingredients missing for people to actually move their life forward? And I know that there's a couple of other ingredients into that discipline. May I add, maybe doing the right discipline? Like if you're not actually doing the right things to actually get you where you want, then you're going to wake up one day and going, well, I don't have what I want. But do you think that in culture today, that might be the big thing that's missing?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like you're disciplined in a lot of different things. It just depends in what direction. You hate your job, you don't make enough money, your relationship is crap with your significant other, and yet you get in the car and drive to a job that you don't even like, that you're not putting your all into, and you insist on turning the radio on or listening to sports radio for God's sakes. And I'm not knocking the local boys here on the radio. I listen to talk radio once in a while, when the Oilers are in the playoffs. So I can sound like I know what I'm talking about when I'm hanging out with friends watching a game. But at the end of the day, like they're not going to make your life better unless you're a sports analyst or you're playing on the team. So why are you listening to them? Yeah. You don't make enough money, listen to money-making material. your relationship isn't good, or it's on the rocks, or it's on the way out, or you're whatever the case is. Well, why aren't you listening to marriage and relationship information?
Mhm.
But instead, you get in the car and you're disciplined to turn the dial on and listen to pop radio or rock and roll or classic rock or hip hop or whatever it is that you want to tickle your ears with. And it's like, well, you're disciplined in that. How's it working for you?
Mhm.
Why you could just as simply be disciplined in this other area and shift gears and go in this direction instead. But again, like anything, it's a habit. And if you don't do it repeatedly and consistently, then it's not going to, the habit's not going to take, and you're not going to get any benefit from it.
You and I have read books like The Slight Edge, The
Mm,
Compound Effect. I remember those books being very specific about you can create great habits and create positive results, but it also works in the opposite direction where you can have negative habits in your life. And the thing about those ones is they feel comfortable. I mean, if I have a belly today, I got here on purpose. Let's be for real. I may not eating healthy, not working out. I felt great about maybe not working out and eating unhealthy, but hey, I got the results out of that for not being
yeah.
on purpose and actually wanting to stay healthy. And so I love that we're talking about this because I think it's missed. It's missed a lot of the time that, hey, you need to be intentional about what you're putting into your life. And on purpose, though, because we're intentional, as you just mentioned, on putting on that radio, listening to guys talk about sports, and is it really helping you out? Is it
Mm.
really truly helping you out? And if we're honest with ourselves, we can probably go, no, I didn't really gain much value out of that except entertainment.
Well, I remember meeting Brian Tracy at an event that he had here in Edmonton back in, I think it would have been 2007. No, it was 2008. And
Really?
my wife and I were living downtown, didn't have kids yet. And he was hosting a seminar just a couple blocks away at the Coast Hotel. And so I walked there, listening to Brian Tracy talk about a myriad of things, one of which was what he calls his EVE ratio, his education versus entertainment ratio. And he says the problem
Mm.
with most people in society is the entertainment's like 100, points, but then the education is like 10 or 5 or 1. For every 100 minutes you're going to spend watching a TV show, you might spend 10 or 5 or 1 minute doing something that actually benefits you and increases your skill set, improves your mindset, or helps you develop better habits. And he said a bunch of things at that seminar, and that was the one thing that stood out, over the last, I guess that'd be 16, 17 years,
Mm.
where I'll catch myself and I'm sitting there going, okay, I've watched one episode of this show on Netflix that's really cool, and I want to watch it because my brain's fried and I've had a long day and I just want to relax.
Yep.
But if I watch the next one and it leads to the next one, and I'm being disciplined and grabbing the remote, turning the TV on and sitting, instead of going, okay, I can do a little bit of that, but then what else should I be doing to make sure that I'm better tomorrow than I am today? Otherwise, why would I expect anything different tomorrow if I'm
Mm.
not getting any better, right? So that EVE ratio really stood out for me. And
I love it.
yeah,
You threw the word education out there, and I think we need to clarify for those out here who love going to school and that formal education. If that's your gig, for sure, do it up. But if you're somebody that never went to post secondary, you don't feel like you have the smarts to go sit in a classroom. When you're talking about education, you're talking about going to people like Brian Tracy, listening to other people that have gone before you, putting yourself in this arena of learning and just educating yourself in that way. It doesn't have to be this formal education setting. Would you agree?
I do. And I've kind of flip flopped on that
Mm-hmm.
topic quite a lot because, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
and I both grew up, we
Yep.
read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yep.
And, I did go to post secondary. After a semester, I dropped out.
Yep.
Um, and so at first I kind of had this idea of, well, unless you're going to go there for something specific, like, STEM or you're going to go into medicine, or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you're going to be a nurse or a doctor or a dentist or an engineer. Like, please, engineers, go to school so the bridges don't fall down. That's super important.
Yeah.
But if you're just going to go to find yourself, I've always thought, well, that's a bloody waste of your parents' money, or you're putting yourself in a lot of student debt for no benefit or very little benefit. And I've actually kind of changed my tune on that over the years. And I'm in a really different space in my life because now my daughters are getting old enough where in the next few years, they're going to be making those decisions about where are they going to go to post-secondary if they are going to go. So we need to sit down. My wife, Kate, and I will sit down with them and we'll go, if this is your goal, let's reverse engineer those steps back. So that way you're choosing the right core courses and making sure, like, I don't care if you bomb in cosmetology, if you're not going to be a hairdresser, but you needed an option to graduate high school. But if you're going to go into medicine, like, you can't be bombing, a chemistry and biology, because those marks will impact your admittance into a program, which will impact your ability to get the degree, to get the training, to get the career, and to do what it is that you feel you're called to do. And so I've kind of changed my tune on it a little bit. I still think that for the vast majority of people that do go to post-secondary, it probably is just a lot of drinking and partying and wasting money. And having said that, though, I do see a lot of benefit for a lot of people where the relationships that you develop with all of the like-minded people, hopefully, that you're sitting in lectures with. And then secondly, that, you're at that stage in your life where you're an adult legally, but mentally, emotionally, for the most part, most people in post-secondary at that age, you're 18, 19, 20, 21, you're not an adult. You're basically extending adolescence, and you haven't put away childish ideas, and you haven't mastered emotions. And I'm saying this not as somebody who has. I have emotions flare up all the time. But, going to post-secondary and having to study and having to say no to the party and actually buckle down and make sure you know what the heck is going to be on that test tomorrow so you can ace it. I think going through that experience, if somebody said to me, hey, Justin, your daughter is going to be super disciplined. They're going to be very knowledgeable. They're going to be very mature. They're going to have life skills like being able to say no to things they want to do in the moment so they can say yes to the things they want to do long-term. It's just going to cost you $60,000. Would you stroke a check for it? And then boom, instantly they would have that depth of character. And I'd sit there and go, that's a life hack. I'll go get a loan, or I'll, pull it out of my savings or whatever. And then stroke the check, because boom, I want my daughter to have those qualities. Well, if you look at post-secondary as an incubator for those things, if they have the right mindset and the right supports, and they're not just going there to, joke around and mess around, then I can genuinely say, I think there's a big benefit that even if you're just getting, some degree that doesn't necessarily lead to like a profession, like a lawyer or an engineer or a doctor or what have you. I do think, though, there's a lot of fluff degrees that are a bloody waste of money. But who knows? You should have them on the podcast so we can talk about that.
I think you nailed it. I mean, you're right. To be able to, the nice thing about your daughters, they have a father that is on purpose, has learned, reflected, and has a different perspective moving forward. So your kids are blessed, man. I'm excited that you're going to be able to have those conversations with them. And if you're going to go to post-secondary, all the power to you. Do it, and do it well, and go impact the world, because we do need doctors. We do need engineers and all that. Of course we do. And I'm in the same boat as you, man. I got 5 kids, and we're going to have that same conversation. You want to go? 100%. You have my full support in that. I want you to do it, but I want you to do great at it. But if you don't, and we can figure out a different way for you to still be, successful and move forward, well, let's figure it out.
Well, and I love that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I just love that reverse engineering idea as well. Let's back it up and let's start and see how this plays out. But yeah.
Well, and they have a really good example too, because like I'm on one side of that equation, and then on the other side, I've got my wife. Like, she busted her butt. She did the whole, first year, second year kind of, oh, my grades aren't there, and then she buckled down and she made some very hard decisions. She excelled in her post-secondary. She did like pre-med because she was going to go be an MD, and instead she ended up shifting her focus to becoming basically a forensic nurse, like CSI kind of stuff, without the cool music and all of the fancy equipment. But, I'm super proud of the fact that, like, I married an awesome woman who, she works with me now. She doesn't do that career. But when I look at her, I go, there's a great example of, man or woman, doesn't matter. Somebody who had a goal. They reverse engineered the steps to get there, and then they were disciplined and consistent in improving themselves. and achieving that goal. And I mean, no word of a lie, when I got started in real estate, like we had just gotten married and I was only a couple of years in the business, I wasn't, quote unquote successful. If it wasn't for her and her job, we would have been screwed, or we would have had a very different experience. We were actually talking about this literally a few days ago, so that's why it's kind of fresh on my mind right now. But there's definitely benefits. I just think it's silly to not question the assumptions that we have from maybe the previous generation, our parents, our family's expectations, or that society puts on us, that if you don't have a BCom and you're going into business, you're a fool. It's like, well, some of the smartest people I know in business were high school dropouts or post-secondary dropouts. That being said, some of the most intelligent and successful people I know in business as well have MBAs and they're good friends. And I go to them for advice. And I said, and that's why I say, like, going back, man, if I would have maybe taken some courses and actually stayed an extra semester and listened and took more notes, I would have skipped a lot of heartache in the school of hard knocks that I learned, in the real world while they were learning it from a textbook perspective. But it's like, I look at their trajectory and they skipped that, learning lesson because they already learned it in a book in school. And so they knew maybe I shouldn't go down that road, whereas I had to learn it the hard way. So there's trade-offs. It just depends.
That's so good. Now you're reminding me of something that you like to talk about a lot, and it's that fancy little slogan, "Do hard things." And the school of hard knocks, I mean, will get us to do some hard things, and not to take away from the guys that have taken the post-secondary route, because that's hard. When I hear about what Kate did, your wife did, to put herself through that education, that must have been hard and wasn't an easy pathway. But let's talk about this, because you love to talk about doing hard things. What's your mindset behind that? Like, why is that a flag that you like to wave?
It's funny because the way you're explaining it to anybody who's watching and listening to this, it makes it seem like I'm doing all these cool things on social media. I'm not. And I've said this before on social media. If I rewind back to last fall, I made a decision to start doing ice baths in the morning, or at least daily. Sometimes it's in the evening because my schedule is way out of whack. And it turned into first it was 5 days, then it was 7 days. Then I got to day 10 and I'm like, oh, I've done this like 10 days in a row. This is really awesome. Now I can take a break. And if I look at every part of my life over the last 20 years where I've gotten some momentum, and I look and I ask myself, why did that not continue? It's because I've had this habit, this consistent discipline of not being consistent and not being disciplined with doing something every day, even if I didn't want to do it. And that seems like such a silly thing, but Dan Kennedy has a great quote: "Little hinges swing big doors." The small stuff in your life that you're overlooking is not small stuff. It's symptomatic of what's going on up here, what you're focusing on here, and what you're not doing with these things at the end of the day. And I'll give you an example just from today, because I'm not perfect and I want to keep it real. I had a drink in the car the other day, and so I set the bottle behind my seat, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get it later. Well, I got to the office this morning and I'm going upstairs and I grab my bag out of the back of the car and I'm looking, and this bottle's just staring at me like, aren't you going to pick me up? And I'm like, oh, I'll get you later. And I walked away from my car feeling so guilty and knowing I'm probably going to have to admit this on Walter's podcast in an hour, because the thing is not the thing. Okay. No. The thing is almost never the thing. It's either how we're looking at the thing, or it's something entirely different that we're completely overlooking altogether. And in that moment, leaving a bottle in the back of my car has nothing to do with my car having a bottle in the back and not looking clean. It has everything to do with the fact that that little thing is symptomatic of the bigger things in my life, where I make the decision to go, I'm going to get to that later. I'm going to do that paperwork later. I'm going to file that stuff, with my accountant later. And then you wake up one day and you go, why am I so anxious? Why am I so full of stress? And it's because in the back of your mind, you've got like 562 different things that you said later to, and now they're piling up, and it becomes this avalanche of just wasted energy that drags you from actually having momentum and moving forward. And so, took me a couple minutes to realize this after, 30 some odd years of living on this planet. And I said to myself, if I can do an ice bath every single day, if I can work out or do something physical, when I say work out, sometimes that's just a really big set of push-ups and some squats in the basement, and I'm done in 5 minutes. And people are like, well, that's not a workout. I'm like, show me your streak of doing something every single day.
Right.
You know,
That's right.
some of us have 10,000 day streaks of watching Netflix. Maybe not 10,000, but you know what I mean? Like, that's a problem. So really, do hard things has nothing to do with working out super hard or jumping in a cold plunge. I think the coldest it hit was like minus 60 something with the wind chill at my place this winter. It has nothing to do with those things. It has everything to do with the fact that I made a commitment to myself to do this thing every single day. And then to keep myself accountable, I ran my mouth on Facebook and Instagram and said, I'm going to do this every day. And I posted about it. And once you start posting, now all of a sudden you've got this crowd of people, and some of them are rooting for you. You're in this category. Some of you who are rooting for me that might watch this, I know who you are. I pay attention. I click every day and I'm like, oh, look at all these people showing up. And I also know probably more than half of those people that are clicking and watching every day, they're waiting for the day where they get to say, see, there, he stumbled. There, he failed. He finally, he's full of crap. He's not consistent. And I'm like, that's okay. This isn't for you. I post that stuff every single day because it's a commitment to myself to make sure that I do it. And so really, that's the hard thing. It's doing it when you don't want to do it, doing it when you're not motivated, doing it when you don't feel like it. And the thing that I've chosen to do that is just, ice baths and working out and training for a marathon in August, which we'll see how that goes. But do it anyways, right?
Well, and I'm going to unpack a couple of other things that you've done, but quickly, it's so true what you're saying, like being accountable to yourself, following through, being consistent, like that is hard. And the fact that you're understanding that you're working on that, and you're being able to work on those disciplines, like we've been talking from the beginning, that's huge, and that is hard, and people need to pay attention to that. It is not, the thing is not the thing. I love that you said that because it applies in all areas of our lives. And some of us need to pause and go, okay, this surfacey thing that I am expressing or showing or doing, there's actually something deeper behind that. And do we understand what that is, why it's happening, all that, right?
100%. Yeah, the thing is almost never the thing.
Hey, on this topic of doing hard things, and shifting our conversation a little bit, something I failed to mention at the beginning of this podcast about you, and it's kind of come up already a couple times, is that you're an author. You've written some books here, and the reason I'm bringing that up, because I think that's an accomplishment. Regardless of how, whether you self-published or not, or whatever the angle was for it, and the fact is that you are an author, and that was some hard work, I presume. And the reason I say that, because I think that you're an expert on the topics that you're talking about, but accomplishing that task, I'm in that list. You know that I want to be an author. I want to write books. The difference between you and me right now is that you've done it, and I can come up with a million reasons on why I haven't done it yet, but at the end of the day, you've done it, and I want to point that out because it's great. Would you like to kind of hit on that a little bit, on that journey of writing these books and the purpose behind them?
Sure, actually, and thanks for bringing that up. I think everybody's got at least one book in them that they should probably write, even if it's just for you to look on the shelf and read it and remind yourself of where you've come from and what you've done. But in terms of real estate, I mean, the biggest thing that I kind of look at is, and Earl Nightingale says this, he goes, the majority is almost always wrong. And so if you want to succeed in life in any area, you take a note at what the majority is doing. And if you do the opposite, not always, but statistically, you're probably going to do a lot better. For instance, if we want to be in very good shape and have really great marriages and great relationships with our children and be successful in all areas of our life, would we do what the average person does? Because if we did, that would mean that the average person has a six-pack, has a loving marriage, that their kids adore them, they have great close relationships, and they're swimming in money, and they're successful at their profession, their job, their business, and everything's all awesome. But the reality is, most, if not all, society, and that majority in some or all of those areas of their lives, they're not living it to the fullest that they would at least admit, if they're honest with themselves, that they would like to. And that's because the majority is almost always wrong. And so when I look at real estate, I kind of made the decision early on saying, well, how do I set myself apart, number one? And then more importantly, the bigger reason was, how do I add value to the people that I'm connecting with? If they meet with me and then they never talk to me again, how do I make sure that that experience was educational, that it was insightful, that it gave them greater clarity and understanding, even if they never call me back because maybe they don't like the language I use, or that I talk about certain things so openly, without holding back, or that I'll tell them what they don't want to hear because they're expecting this, and I'm telling you, you can't do that because you have poo-poo in the yard and cat pee-pee in the carpet. We got to do some things here. Well, that's not true. The market's hot. It's like, it doesn't matter if the market's hot. If your house smells like a toilet, you got to do some work. Not calling out anybody in specific, but really that led me to look at, how do I set myself apart? How do I add value? And I kind of noticed I was repeating a lot of the same advice and instructions to clients over the years. And one of them, for example, was don't book the moving truck on closing day. So you're buying a house, Walter's moving into his Casa Perez mansion. And I told Walter, I said, you and Alex, you're going to get keys on August 1st. Do not book the moving truck on August 1st. Why? Well, because it's probably not going to happen. But if there's any kind of delay between your lender, if you're getting a mortgage, and your lawyer, or your lawyer and the other lawyer, or that lawyer and the listing agent on the other end of the deal of the house that you bought, if there's any piece that gets delayed or goes sideways for whatever reason that is not in our control, you may have some delays. So don't expect everything to go smoothly. It usually does, though. But the problem is when you have the U-Haul on the driveway at 11:59 and the TELUS guy's sitting there going, I got to get to my next appointment, and your kids are screaming and your wife's got to use the bathroom and you're screaming mad. And it's like, do you remember the conversation that we had about don't book stuff on moving day? So yeah, in terms of like the books, it was really interesting because what I found is when I wrote this stuff and I put it in a book and I gave it to people that I was meeting, a really interesting thing started happening. Not only did people come to their initial consultation prepared with notes and things filled out, they were telling me, hey, here's my schedule for the next 2 weeks. Here's when we can go take a look at homes. And by the way, we've already taken a look based on the criteria that you had us write down, the top 3 things and whatnot. Here's a list of homes that are on the market right now that we'd love to go see. And I'm sitting there going, okay, cool. Whatever it is that just happened up here is a result of them going through some sort of process that prepared them to have clarity on what it is they're after, why it is they want it. And it not only made my job not easier, because it's not easy. Sometimes it's simple, but it's not easy. But it made it a lot better for them because they had clarity. And so that was a big aha for me. If I could put a lot of information together that is transformational, if I can put wisdom on pages, and somebody, if they take the time to invest in themselves and read the stuff, they can make better decisions. And not only does it help me help them, it also helps them come to a better conclusion and all of these things. So,
and you asked that question, how can you serve clients at a higher level? And that's exactly what you're doing through that. And to an extent, I mean, yeah, you can measure the impact. I think you can, because some of these guys and people, families that you've given these books to, they've learned a few things. They come back to you, the repeat clients. And the other side of that coin, the impact will go on, and you'll never fully know how it will actually impact people. But I believe you're creating impact, and that's makes you stand out. It makes you a different person. You want to add value to them. And I love it. I love that you took that step and said, okay, I'm going to do this. I have something to share, something to say, and let's do it. And then you kind of tweak along the way, and I'm pretty sure you're not done writing books, but I'm excited to see what you're going to produce in the future.
I'm excited to see when you start crushing your first trilogy, because I've been waiting. Clock's ticking. You got to start typing.
Well, I appreciate that, and you know what, you and I were having a conversation weeks ago, because over the years, you and I, one thing we've been really good at is dreaming and encouraging each other and being real too. Like, hey, I know that you want to be up here, but you got to start doing the stuff right now. And we've had many conversations over the years, and I appreciate that because you and I were able to have a moment not too long ago and be able to say, oh, this is where we said we were going to do this 10 years ago, and here we are. And I am not at all implying that I have arrived. I'm not even close to being where I want to be, but it's neat to know that, okay, we have done some of the things we said we were going to do, and
Yeah.
and keep going. Hey, I'm reminded of something that I think that you've been pretty good at, and it's something that I'm still continuing to learn, and that is journaling. Um, is that something that you kind of still do, or how? Because, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because I remember you encouraging me to do it because the importance of that and what you were reading later on, and maybe potentially your kids could read it one day. It's something that I'm trying to pick up, but is that a discipline that you're still carrying on, or?
I guess that depends on what snippet of time that we're going to measure that statement by, because
Okay.
if it is recent memory over the last few years, then the answer would be no. If it is over the span of a few decades, then the answer is yes. But if I
Mm,
look back, it is spurts and then ghosting. Sometimes
mm,
well, in this case, I mean, the last time I cracked a journal and wrote something down was probably, I want to say, close to maybe 2 years ago, being
mm,
completely honest.
yeah.
And I don't say that with any guilt or shame, because if I go back in all of my previous journals, there's periods for 6 months, a year, 2, 3
Yeah.
years where I didn't write anything down. And the power in it is when you actually do go back and you look and you see it's kind of like, those time lapse videos on social media, on YouTube or whatever, like they plant the seed
Yeah.
and then it's like day 1, day 2, day 3,
Yeah.
and they speed up through like 300 days of growth, and it goes from this little thing to this massive plant in a greenhouse. The issue is, if we're up close to it every single day, we don't see the progress, we don't see the growth. But if we take a snapshot of 300 days ago compared to now, they're very different. And
Mm,
so the habit of journaling,
mm,
even if it's inconsistent, even if you did it once and then a year later you did it again for a couple months every other day or whatever, or whenever something struck you, that's typically how I do it. I don't sit there and write dear diary like every day, but
yeah.
when something is impactful, when I'll have an experience that really resonated with me and I want to remember it, and as I get older, this is becoming more and more important, which is why I should get back into this.
Mm,
If I'm gone, what do I want my kids to know about me and what I'm
yeah.
going through right now? Because, my daughters are a certain age and they're seeing it through their lens. When their parents,
Mm,
15, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, what do I want them to understand about what I was going through and what I was seeing, what I was praying about, or what I was
yes.
struggling with, or what I was
Ah,
focusing on, so that maybe not only can they look at it through different eyes now and see, okay, when my dad was really, you know, abrupt with me that day, I didn't realize it was because he was dealing with this monumental thing at work or this
right.
huge, life
Mm,
change in his personal life. And now I see why he was that way. So I have a bit more grace and I give forgiveness, and then they can release that garbage and not let it
yeah.
drag them down for the next
Yeah.
50 years. Right. So I
Yeah.
kind of look at journaling as that snapshot into the past that I would want my children
Mm,
to see and read and understand and go, okay, not only can I maybe learn from
mm,
the mistakes and also take notes on the things that my dad did right, but I
yep.
can also get an idea of why he was the way he was, so I can have the ability to let go of anything that I'm holding on to, because I only saw it through, my 9-year-old eyes or my 14
Yeah.
year old eyes, not my adult perspective.
Mm,
And yeah, the only
mm.
way you do that is you just do it. And again, I'm not saying that like I'm amazing at it. I haven't picked up my journal for a couple of years and written anything down of substance, but Yeah.
No, I love it, and I bring it up because that is not a discipline that I'm good at, but I'm aware that it's something that I want to get into, and it doesn't matter how you write it down, a thought process, point form, paragraph. It doesn't matter. Just write something down, and I'm speaking more to me and maybe anybody out there that is on the fence on whether doing it or not. I think you just gave us some good things to think about on why we should do it, and I appreciate that. You know, you talk about your kids, and so you got three daughters.
Mm-hmm.
I have three daughters as well, plus two boys, and um, the only thing is your daughters are older than mine, and I'd love to hear from you though. How is it being a father of three girls, and how has that shaped you into the man you are today?
A lot of shotguns, boys, if you're watching. I'm not joking. Um, among other projectile firearm implements, but no, it's definitely made me realize. Like I think God's got a sense of humor for sure in that, and a lot of people have said to me over the years, oh, why didn't you keep on going? Why didn't you have that boy? Like all of a sudden, that's something that's important. Again, like cultural ideas, right? Of like legacy and passing your name down and all this crap. And I'm like, and I shouldn't say crap, but I've never looked at it that way. I've always kind of looked at legacy as not what you leave behind, but who you bring with you. If you catch my drift, and if you know, you know. And so if I'm really focused on legacy, then I'm not really concerned about having my name on a building or um, having some endowment fund. That's not legacy to me. Legacy is again who you bring with you into that future. And so knowing that, I've never had an issue at all. It's never even been a thought in my mind, and I can say this with 100% honesty. God strike me with lightning if I'm lying, and I'm not. I've never once regretted not having a son. If I had one, would it be great? Sure, because every child is a blessing from God. But
Yep.
I don't care, and I don't say that like I don't care. It has never fazed me, because when I see my daughters, I go, okay, they've been entrusted to me to protect and to provide for and to raise, and I'm just consumed with that. So why would I even worry about something that didn't happen because I had some cultural expectation, or because somebody thought, well, this is what you should do. You should have kind of like a bit of a balance between boys, like all of that nonsense. And I don't want to say it's offensive, because I don't want to get all, touchy about it, but it does kind of, as I get older, it does kind of make me a little bit upset, because people will say this in front of my daughters, and my daughters will hear that and then assume that it's true, or they won't believe me when I tell them that it's not true, that I've never, ever had that enter my mind. So girls, if you're watching this, here's more proof on public record on the internet forever with Walter, Uncle Walter. I have never once regretted not having a son. I am in love with my daughters. Yeah. They are amazing. I'm super proud of them. They got on my nerves because, they're mostly all teenage girls now, but they're a ton of fun, and I get a kick out of them, and I'm very proud of them.
One of my favorite passages says that children are a blessing from the Lord, and they're like arrows in the hands of a warrior.
Yes.
And I bring that up because you, my friend, are a warrior, and I watch how you parent your children from afar and close up, and you're doing an amazing job. And of course, we're going to have our challenging days. I got 5 of them. I know what you're talking about. I know how challenging and difficult it can be, but I love that you do have this bow in your hands in your life right now that you're bringing back, you're pulling back, and you're releasing some amazing ladies in the future that are just going to impact the world. And so I want to display that. I think
they're at the age where a lot of that outcome is going to be up to them now.
Yep.
Because you can't control them. You just have to do your best to guide them and love them and say, hey, like if you touch the hot stove, you're going to burn yourself. Maybe don't do that. Yeah. But then I think as you get older as a parent, you also have to realize, no, like you have to let them touch the hot stove once in a while to kind of learn, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. And dad was right, or mom was right. And like Kate and I were talking about this yesterday. To their credit, for the most part, like they get it. We'll tell them and sit them down and say, hey, daughter of mine, you have thought this and said this and acted in this manner, but like, have you considered that it's going to lead to this? And do you want that blessing? Or sorry, do you want that curse, or do you want blessings? And they'll sit there and they'll argue, or they'll fight it, or they'll come up with some smart aleck remark, like, you know, somebody I knew way back in the day might have. That was me, by the way, not you. And so again, God's got a sense of humor, right? But
Yeah.
I'll look at that and I'll go, okay, I think that kind of landed. And then fast forward a day or two or a week, and I'll watch them respond differently instead of reacting in the same way. And I go, repetition is the mother of skill. If I yell something at them enough times, eventually it breaks through here and it settles in here, and then it changes them. And I think that's why it's so important to not only constantly be seeking truth in your own life, but also not being afraid to speak that truth into the lives, not just your children, but like your spouse, your coworkers, your friends, your family, your community at large. Like the silence of people who know truth is I think a big reason why society is the way it is right now. And the fact that we can't have a discussion amongst people who maybe are seeing the same thing from two different sides of the perspective, and we're just having this massive argument about it instead of going like, well, where's the common ground? Where's the truth? And I'm saying that as somebody, I mean, anybody who looks at my social media from like 10 years ago is going to be, oh, he's such a hypocrite. Look at how inflammatory this guy is. I love me a good social media dumpster fire, and I can light matches with the best of them. But the older I get, and especially with my daughters, you know, to go back to your point on parenting, is the biggest thing as their dad that I've realized is my relationships with them is a reflection on my pursuit or lack of pursuit on what is true, and am I living in integrity and standing up for that and trying to live that out in my life? Because if I'm not doing it, I can't expect them to do it, and they're not going to catch it, right? Because children, they catch more. Well, what's the phrase? They're not taught, they're caught. You could say it all day, but they're more mirroring what you do, not what you say.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, let's hope they take the right notes.
Yeah. As we're having this conversation, there's things that are coming to mind. And on this idea of where you get your inspiration from, your motivation to do everything that you do, a few things that come to mind from what I've heard you say today, you know, family is a big deal, your faith. I know that hanging around with the right people, listening to the right people as well, input matters, books, audios, conferences, whatever. But is there something else that maybe I missed in that you go, no, I draw my inspiration from blank?
Not everybody that watches or listens to this is going to resonate with it, but from a faith perspective, if you don't read the Bible, you don't believe in Jesus. I'm not here to judge. That's completely up to you. Everyone's on their own journey. But for me, when I read scripture and it says, you know, you're dead in your sin and you need grace and forgiveness, and that's what Jesus came for and died for, and accepting that changes your whole life. That to me, and again, I sound like the biggest hypocrite, which is why I say I am the worst example of anything that is righteous or anything that's discipline or anything that anybody should take any notes on, because I know where I failed so much and I know why I need so much grace. And so the biggest motivation for me is there's this parable in the Bible. It's called the parable of the talents. You can Google parable of talents. It's in the Gospel of Matthew. And the story is this: Jesus is talking to the disciples and he tells them, look, there's this master that brings his 3 servants to him before he goes away on a trip. And to one servant, he gives, it was like 5 talents. A talent was an ancient Near East term for like a sum of money. You can use it as whatever metaphor you want, but he gives the first servant like 5 talents. And then to the next servant, he gives, I think, like 2 talents or something. And then to the last servant, he gives 1 talent, and then he goes away. And after a time, he comes back and he brings the servants to him and he goes, okay, give an account of what you did with what I gave you. And I find it interesting that the word talents in English means a few different things. And we don't look at it as a monetary sum, but as a metaphorical term. Talents, like your skills, your abilities, your talents, your gifts, the things that you're good at or the things that you've developed, right? So we can look at it in 2 different angles. And the first servant goes, hey, master, you gave me 5 And I went and I made 5 more. And the master goes, well done, good and faithful servant. And then he goes to the next servant, and obviously same thing. Hey, what did you do? And he says, master, you gave me 2. I turned that 2 and I did these things and I turned it into 4. And the master goes, well done, good and faithful servant. Then he gets to the last servant. And that servant shows up and he goes, I know you're a hard master, and I was afraid that I would lose what you gave me. So I hid it in the ground. Here it is. I've dug it up and I'm giving it back to you. And you would think, from let's take it from an investing standpoint. Well, I took this money and I didn't really put it into a real estate deal. I didn't invest it in, NVIDIA or Netflix or GameStop and watch it go to the moon. I didn't want to lose it. So it's in my bank account. Here it is. Right. And the master's response is very counterintuitive and very interesting. He looks at this last servant and he goes, you wicked and lazy servant, depart from me. The implication is you literally did nothing. So out of fear, you took no action because you had no faith. Because if you had some faith, you would have taken some action. And then at least if you would have taken action but lost it, you were doing so in the pursuit of something greater. And I think what inevitably happens is you can't walk in faith and take action in faith and not reap a harvest. You will reap what you sow. And so circling back to your question and the motivation and sounding like a complete Bible thumping hypocrite. If you catch me dropping F-bombs in traffic, I'm sorry. Don't put me on a pedestal. I am not a good example of anything that is righteous. But my motivation is if I get hit by a bus this afternoon, I want to make darn sure that when I open my eyes on the other side of eternity, that Jesus goes, well done, good and faithful servant. That to me is that's what's up. Sorry, I'm getting edit the emotional part out. I'm gonna have here. I'm gonna ruin your recording so you can't use this part of the clip, and then we'll get back to that there. But yeah, that to me is that's my main motivation in everything, in my marriage, in being a father, in business, with the people that I call friends, which I'm very blessed. I have very good friends in my life. That's my hope, is that God goes, well done, good and faithful servant. I'd like to think he'll probably kind of look at me sideways and giggle and laugh and go, well, like, what were you thinking with half the stuff that you did? But get in here anyways, and I'm like, see, grace is such a good thing. But yeah, that's my motivation, is if I get hit by a bus, am I being faithful and am I being good?
All right. I love what you said there, Justin. And, I was going to ask you if you had a piece of advice for our listeners, but I think that you nailed it in what you just shared. It all interlocks and really is connected. And so I really appreciate you sharing your heart, because I'm with you. I think that's important. And if you're listening to this, if you don't jive with this faith stuff, don't disregard everything else we talked about. Listen to this again, meditate on this, and just take it and just see where it goes. But I love that you mentioned that, because that's super important. So I got another question for you, Justin. And in your opinion, what makes a great leader?
I think the ability to seek truth. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to believe your own justifications, because really all justifications are just lies as to why you did or didn't do something. And it's how you make yourself feel better about it. And that can be in the littlest of things in your life, and it can be on the biggest things in your life, personally or professionally. I sat down with a friend of mine who's a broker owner of another real estate brokerage, literally just yesterday. And we were talking about how one individual that we knew of had made some very poor decisions in terms of justifying their actions in the real estate industry, and the ripple effect and the impact that that's had on many people's lives. and not necessarily in a good way. And this is somebody who I've taken notes from and I've learned a lot from as well, but then also learned, hey, like if you want to be an effective leader, if you want to be truly successful, not just having surface level success, because money and status and awards and all that other crap, yeah, sure, they're important for a time, but that should be the result of you chasing after truth in your life, in all areas of your life. You know, a good marriage is a reflection of you seeking truth in your marriage, having good relationships with your children, with your friends. That's you not being afraid to seek truth and to speak that into people's lives. Otherwise, you're a phony, and your relationships are built on, garbage. And then in terms of business and, leadership from maybe like a corporate perspective, I mean, how often do you see headlines where greedy executives take advantage of, shareholders or the public to boost their stock price and get a big exit? And it's like, where's the truth in that? Because the truth of the matter is, deep down, you probably know what you're doing is wrong, but you become so desensitized to the conviction that you know better, because you continually believe the lie that you tell yourself about why you need to do it this way or why it's better and it's for the greater good and all this other crap, instead of going, where's the truth? And I'm going to seek that at all costs, because I think if you seek truth, inevitably you will find it. And so I think that's the heart of an effective leader, or one of, I would say, the aspects of an effective leader is their ability to seek truth, even when it hurts, even when it's hard, and even when it comes at, great personal cost. Like, how else do you want to live? Do you want to win, but you're a liar?
I love your response, Justin. Thank you for sharing your heart on that. And I do have another question for you. I love to ask all my guests, because you are on the It Matters podcast. And what I would love to know is, what matters to you right now?
I think sequence. And what I mean by the term sequence is that there's a certain order of areas of your life. And if you don't put the right things in the right places in the right order, then things can become very messy very quickly. And it's like if you're building like a tower of some sort, right? Like your foundation's got to be wide and solid and strong. And only then do you start building up higher and higher and higher. You don't start with the top and put it at the bottom and then put the heavy stuff on the top, because it's all going to topple over and collapse. And so for me, when I think of the word sequence, I think in terms of, you brought this up great about the different areas of your life, your faith, your family, your fitness, your finances, or your business. Like, what order do those necessarily have to go in order to live a successful life all around? And so for me, it's making time and it's making sure I find the time to make the right sequence of those things a priority. If I put my health before all else and my philosophy's out of whack and spiritually I'm just bankrupt, it doesn't matter how healthy I am and how long I am around for my family, which is why a lot of people justify, health pursuits. It's like, well, they're not going to be around because you just ignored them and put all of this other stuff on the back burner. Just like you can also, how many ripped personal trainers do you know that are broke as heck because they've got the fitness thing dialed in, but it's all consuming and they haven't learned how to mesh that with maybe their finances and their business, right? And they need to level up in those areas. So maybe for them, the sequence would be like, dude, put this first, and then, you can do the cardio and the workouts and the macro counting later. So for me, that would be what I think the balancing act that I'm going through right now is making sure that I have family in the right spot, making sure that my faith is in the right spot, and also the fitness thing, because let's face it, you and I are not the quick young men that we used to be, and there's no need for that. We can totally, I think, excel in all areas if we have the right sequence of priorities in our lives.
So good. This conversation's been amazing, Justin. And there's one thing I do know is that you and I are going to have another one like this in the future. And I do have one final question, because we have people listening that would love to learn more about you, follow you. Where can people find you? What do you have for them?
In terms of all things real estate related, social media links to YouTube, links to, Facebook, Instagram, all that other jazz, you can go to getempowered.info. I'm sure Walter can put it in the show notes or in the comments below. Getempowered.info. If you're just looking for like clicking on listings and stuff, empowerrealestategroup.com, but like that's more of a search portal. That's way better than realtor.ca, by the way, and you should totally sign up on it if you're looking for homes. But if you want to creep and do some digging and find out, is this guy really all about what he says he's about, then that's where I would go, is getempowered.info. In terms of personal social media, you're welcome to shoot me a friend request or an ad on Instagram at Mr. LaFavor. Walter can put that somewhere as well. And then on Facebook, I'm the dude with the pink profile picture. I'm sure you can find me pretty easily. Kind of hard to miss. So
awesome. Well, Justin, this has been great. I have appreciated this conversation, and I appreciate you and all of you out there. Thanks for joining us on the It Matters podcast and just joining this conversation, this real conversation that Justin and I had. Go follow him, comment, like, share this episode, please, and we'll catch you in the next episode. And remember, leading well matters.
Thanks for having me, Walter.